Hello and welcome to another episode of Focus On. My name is Gyamo Musipile. We are at the University of Johannesburg at the launch of the World Happiness Report. A first for Africa, this report looks at the relationship between economics, global development, happiness, and well-being of African nations. I spoke to two experts on what they had to say in terms of building a happier Africa for all. We are here at the launch of the World Happiness Report, which is a first for Africa. You are a well-being economist. I want you to start at the top. Unpack for us what is the World Happiness Report and some of the nations that have ranked higher in this report.
It's always interesting for me to explain what is the World Happiness Report. It captures the data on well-being, happiness, and those indicators that actually explain these concepts. But in my mind, I will say it's the Olympics of development. What happened to the development of countries? And today is World Happiness Day, so I hope you've got a good, happy day. But so what it captures is to tell us today that the data is released to show us which country has the highest quality of life, which country is the most happy, emotionally happy, and then various other indicators.
Sure, I want to stay on your point in terms of this ranks the developmental state of countries. One, I want to link those two relationships in terms of a happiness indicator being related to development and economics. Explain that for us, for the layman. And if we zero in the African continent, what are some of the countries that are doing well on that part?
Now, this is something I very often mention. If you listen to the daily news or you listen to the common tongue, you will hear the word, the country is the happiest. Finland is the happiest. And you think they've got big smiles. That's not at all. There are different concepts. So if we look at well-being, there's three ways basically you can think of measuring it. And the first one that as economists we find very important is life evaluation or life ladder. Where's the opinion of yourself? How satisfied are you with your life in general? So I'm asking you to evaluate your life or your quality of life. So when they say Finland is the happiest country in the world, it's not the happiest smiling, but they've got the best evaluation of quality of life. So if we look at Africa and we look at who's got the highest life evaluation, then no surprise, Mauritius. Mauritius is doing really well. The economy is doing well. And then if we look, the next one's Libya. Now, when I first looked at that, I was surprised. And when I actually went and did the research, I could understand. Libya is an oil-rich country and is actually taking the money that they get from the oil and also using it for social benefits for the people. So they're doing really well. Algeria is the next one. The same with Algeria. It's got the inflow of wealth and oil, and it's not keeping it to one person, but actually sharing it. And the policies are really good in those countries. It's a lot of changes has happened. And then number 4, South Africa.
And I want to circle back. So the question that I've asked and the answer that I've gotten from you is a equitable distribution of wealth. But are there any other significant drivers that have influenced the position of these countries in doing so well?
So what we're basically looking at well-being, there's certain factors that has been established in research time and time again that will determine well-being. So definitely income is one. Then there's health, there's education. Then very important is social relationships. There's a few others as well. Trust, for governments, corruption. So there's a few indicators that will actually predict well-being.
And if we also zero in from a global perspective, as what are some of the other countries that are performing well?
As I mentioned Finland, you will always find the Nordic countries at the top of the range very often, number 1, 2, 3, or 4. And the reason is because they've got a very high quality of life. So they've got high levels of income, very good education systems, and a very high level of health, safety, trust. So that's why you will hear Finland is not the happiest country, they've got the highest life evaluation of quality of life.
And it's unsurprising, as you mentioned, that the Nordic countries would often perform well in this space. But I also really want to come back to Africa. This event is being hosted on the African continent. It is a first, as I've mentioned. One, what are some of the ways that you, or the conclusions that you have drawn in terms of the perception of Africa and how it then fares on this index? And more importantly, what does this gathering mean as well for it being hosted here on the African continent?
Have you ever heard any Africa country mentioned when they announce the happiest countries in the world? No. So I think it is wonderful that they actually now recognize Africa and that there's some focus on Africa so that we can hear what's happening in Africa. If we think of well-being, and I'm now speaking about life evaluation, not happiness, because Africa is a very, very happy continent emotionally. But then well-being is something really needed in Africa. If I could show you a map now, you will see that Africa is really, if we put it in different colors, the brightest colors being very happy and very light colors is not that happy, or a low level of life evaluation. Then you will see Africa is really in the very weakest, mildest colors. Africa is not a high life evaluation against the rest of the world. So, thus, the focus must be here. Well-being must improve here. Not just that, we've got the potential to improve well-being tremendously. I mean, we've got everything to do this. Well, I think if we look at the rest of the world, maybe they've achieved what they can achieve.
At a first glance, or for the layman that is watching this interview, what informs some of the metrics on who you speak to and some of the people that you have collected this information from?
Well, the core metric is life evaluation. And you should understand that as human beings, we have two ways to assess whether we are happy or not. We can compare our current life to the most ideal life we have in mind, and we can reflect on how we feel in general. Well, both measures are represented in the World Happiness Report, but the main measure on which countries are ranked is the life evaluation. How does our life compare to the worst possible life we can imagine and to the best possible life we can imagine?
And just expanding on that, what would then the worst ranking on the life evaluation look like versus the best?
Well, that depends from person to person. So it can be a life in which you live in poverty, you're unemployed, you're very lonely. So it's a combination of these factors that is for probably most people the worst possible life that they can have in mind.
Sure. And I know also the report also makes mention of happiness versus the life ladder concept. Just to also please explain.
Yes, but the life ladder concept is best worst possible life. And then in the report, there is also a measure which is affective well-being, which people are asked to reflect on a couple of emotions on how they felt yesterday. And so did you feel I think enthusiastic yesterday? Did you feel anger? Did you feel worry? And then there's an index made based on all these different emotions that people experience during the day.
So when we bring it closer to home, in terms of the World Happiness Report, how did Africa fare, especially taking into context some of the perceptions around the African continent?
Well, if you look at the different scores, so Africa doesn't score very high in terms of life evaluation, best worst possible life, the latter, but they score reasonably high in terms of affective well-being. So which kind of, how much positive emotions do you feel on a daily basis?
And am I correct to say Africans have proven to be quite resilient? I know there's also mention of the impact of Ubuntu and sharing is caring in terms of that.
Yes, Ubuntu probably explains this situation of what we call cheerful discontent. Low life evaluation, but a very good experience of positive emotions. And what you see with Ubuntu, it's much about community well-being. And what you see in Africa is that there's much value put on this idea, and which is also you cannot be happy yourself if the people around you are also not happy. And that aligns also very much well with the theme of the World Happiness Report this year, sharing and caring. Both Ubuntu and sharing and caring put emphasis on a culture of empathy, of collaboration, of connectedness, but also generosity. And that is like what we need more of in this world. It's like the world is not always a good place if we watch the news, and we need more Ubuntu and sharing and caring in this world.
And Prof, I want to throw a spanner in the works. If you were in the position to advise policy or government on the data that you have collected, what would you advise in terms of their governance to ensure they have a happier population?
Oh, that's a very good question, but that depends like a little bit on the country you're looking at. And so like also what how well-being economics or well-being studies does is help you to understand how happy people are and what is needed in order to improve happiness. But what is needed in Africa, it's different from what is needed in Europe. Like if you want to improve well-being in Africa, is like focusing, for example, on eradicating poverty in nations. If you look at Europe, poverty is not so much the problem, but at the moment I have the feeling that the polarization and the social relation of social cohesion in countries is a problem. And so it depends on the context of what governments can do. And it's also like governments maybe cannot make people happy, but they can help shape the conditions for happiness. And that is...
We all wish our governments could make us happier. But with this report being launched here in Africa, I certainly feel we are taking the right or the first step towards the right direction.
Yes, and it's important. So like, if you look at research on happiness, most research is on European nations or Western nations. And we really need more research on Africa. And that is also why the World Happiness Report is here, to kickstart research on well-being and happiness in Africa. And I'm very happy that the University of Johannesburg and Professor Grayling wanted to host this event, and also with the establishment of a well-being center here at the University of Johannesburg. I hope that we can achieve getting the knowledge out there and also the awareness that happiness is important and we need to pay attention to that.
And that's how we wrap up this episode of Focus On at the University of Johannesburg at the launch of the World Happiness Report. From me, Kyama Musapile, and the rest of the CNBC Africa team, it's goodbye for now.